On Saturday, my friend and I decided to go camping in a forest in Cavan. We thought it would be a fun experience. After all, me and my neighbor Liam haven't done much this year, and he had a 4-person tent, even though there was only 2 of us. The forest we picked was a usual place close to civilization, so we didn't get lost, and because we had a few family friends within a kilometer or so at all times. Both our parents drove us to the forest with the tent, food, water, chlorine tablets in case we ran out of water, gas stove, battery banks, radio, sleeping bags, a small hunting rifle, and a tool set for setting up the pegs. For the first day, we set up the tent in only a few minutes. I set up the gas stove outside the tent on the ground and cooked some sausages, while Liam was setting up the tent interior, sleeping bags, and the clothes. We had our food and went exploring. A few minutes into our walk, we seen what seemed to be a dead crow on the ground. It didn't look like it was eaten per se, but more like it had just fallen apart on the ground into multiple pieces. We both thought this was weird, but chalked it up to a fox or something ripping it apart. We went down the trail until it was nearing like 9 o'clock, at which point we decided to head back because of the darkness. Back at the tent, we got into our bags after storing the gas stove away and having some supper. I woke up during the night to what sounded like a faint thud in the distance. It didn't wake Liam up, so I had thought nothing of it. In the morning, I decided for us to stay in for a bit and relax. Liam didn't like the idea, but went along with it, saying, "Why though?" I don't want to say I woke up in the middle of the night and was very tired, so I just told him, "I just don't feel like it right now." "Well, do you want some breakfast, Kai? Pass me them Cheerios." It was about 1:30 when I got a text message from our parents asking us how we're doing. We told them that we're doing just fine, because we were. After 6, we just decided to stay in the tent, only going outside to cook food. Now, at 11 o'clock, we prepared to go to sleep until we heard some disturbing noises. The best representation of this is the sound of a person trying to scream at the top of their lungs, but only being able to vomit blood. Like gargling, I guess. But we heard that some animals can sound very, very similar to humans. "Bro, what the absolute fuck was that?" Liam said. "I believe it might be a fox or something. Maybe it's a fight. I don't know." "You know what, I'm gonna get the rifle," I said. Liam sounded quite shaken up, but I did manage to calm him down after a bit of talking. We still stayed up till 1 in the morning to make sure it's gone. The next morning we did the same thing we did yesterday, but a little earlier because we were less tired. "You know what, we got to leave the tent sometime. Let's go for another walk. But this time I'm taking the gun, okay?" I said. Liam agreed to this, and we went down a different trail going east. During our walk through the trail, something was off about the smell and just how dead quiet it was. For reference, in Ireland during the summer, every part of the country has lots of birds chirping and usually crickets. But during this time, it felt like Death Valley. The only sounds you can hear are the leaves and branches under your feet and your own breath. The smell was a lot different. It smelled like being in a morgue with severely decomposed bodies. We couldn't see much though, until we entered a small clearing, a fork in the trail. In front of us were still alive but rapidly bleeding out bodies of 2 young people. We used our spare rags to try and plug the massive chunks of missing body on them. It's probably also good to note that the man was passed out. I was treating the man. Liam treated the woman, who was barely recognizable at this point. We managed to bandage around 3/4 of their body, but they just kept falling apart. We asked the woman, who could barely speak, if she wanted us to end it. She said yes. We couldn't bring ourselves to shoot her, but we thought it was for the best. The man who passed out didn't have a pulse soon after that either. We decided that we've seen enough shit right now, and we should just pack up and say nothing about this to the police. Liam didn't look the same after that. He looked like a soldier from World War I suffering from PTSD. We packed up and waited for our parents to arrive, saying that we just want to go home. They said yes. What really happened in that forest? What was the thud? And why did what happened to the bird happen to those people? I sat in my room not being able to sleep for hours, reliving the moments and being there again and again until I became so tired I passed out. At dinner, my family looked at me and asked, "Why are you so quiet?" I usually don't answer the questions and try to eat the most amount of food I can, but I just can't. 2 days later, I'm in a church awaiting the funeral of Liam, who died of the same causes of those who had been seen at the forest. I will never forget him. He was my friend. We played Halo together, went to school together. and of course, camped together. I will never set foot in a tent or forest again without being reminded of those days. This is a story of a few strange phenomena from what happened years ago back at Silverwood Lake. For a little context, me and my family, featuring my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, love to go camping every year. Spend an average of 4 days there. First for setting up the camp, second and third for regular camping days, and the final day being packing day. There are a lot of mountains where I live, so my family and I would alternate between mountains to camp at. There is this one place called Silverwood Lake. We've gone there a few times and it's nice. There's not a lot of thick forest areas, not a lot of wildlife there either, so it's very quiet and peaceful there. One of the activities my family and I do in the 2 days we get free time is to go hiking on the trails, and we usually spend a couple of hours hiking the mountains, and it's kind of a routine. There are a good amount of trails in the mountain, not a lot to where you get lost, but not too little to where it would be boring. At one of these hiking sessions, we went out a little later than usual, and so we all decided to bring some flashlights and headlamps just in case it went dark while we were hiking. While we were walking on a trail we've taken many times, was a new path that we'd never seen before. It was very wide enough to fit me and my family of 12 other people to stand side by side, with some distance between shoulders, and it had a thick forest area on the sides of the path, which is an unusual sight since the forest of the mountain is pretty thin. Since we had never seen it before, everyone wanted to go explore the new path, and so we did. We walked for around 40 minutes down the path, and that was at the sides next to the thick forest, until nightfall came. We still wanted to go down the path, so we all turned on all the light sources that were with us, being the flashlights and the headlamps. After maybe 3 or 4 minutes of walking, all our lights just went out at the same time, and it was completely dark. And so we started talking like, what happened? While everyone else was talking, I heard rustling in the dense forest to the right of me, and after that all of the lights came back on. My family, especially my grandmas, are superstitious, and after the lights turned off and back on again, decided that it would be best to just go the other way. We ran maybe half of the way back to the campsite, and when we thought it was safe, we started walking again. We finally arrived at the campsite, we lit the fire, made some food, and unwind a bit. We never really said anything about the weird thing that just happened with our lights at the trail. We kinda just left that behind, and eventually it was that time where everyone went to sleep. We all went in our tents and shut our eyes, except me. For some reason, I couldn't sleep after hearing the rustling in the forest area. Kinda startled me, because there's not a lot of wildlife, and the wildlife that is there aren't big enough to make the sounds that I heard. The tent that I was staying in had some fine mesh windows that are covered by well covers, and there's a little gap that you can see through without taking off the whole thing. So I was just laying there, eyes wide open, aware of every sound outside of the tent. Sounds of crickets and bugs, sometimes the occasional sounds of coyotes howling at each other. It was like this until all of a sudden, it was dead silent. All the life that night seemed to have just vanished. And after what seemed like forever in the quietness, I heard footsteps. To ease myself, I just thought that someone had come out to take a nightly piss, but I knew that wasn't what was happening. The footsteps of whatever was outside kept circling the campsite for what seemed like an hour. I was petrified. I couldn't move a muscle, although eventually I gained the courage to see through the small gap of the window. What I saw was only the silhouette of the thing that was roaming. It was a tall figure with bent knees. After looking at it for a couple of seconds, it stopped in its path. When it stopped, I froze. I thought that it had seen me, and I think it did. But after a couple of minutes of it stopping, it walked away. Even though it was walking away, I still could feel the gaze of the creature as it left. When it did leave, all of the night sounds came back, and I just felt mentally exhausted, and so I went to sleep. When I woke up, it was normal. Everyone was there and just talking, and it made me comfortable. We did our usual thing of talking, making food, and existing. Later on, we went to go hike again, as we wanted to continue exploring that path we were on yesterday, so we started walking. When we got to the spot, the path was gone. There was nothing left. All that was left was just fully grown trees on where it was, and everyone was so confused. We went back to camp and stayed there. None of us really wanted to leave the comfort that the camp brought us. The next day we packed up and left, and we never talked about it again. A couple of years later, we went to the same place. It was a normal trip, except for one thing. We saw on a neighboring mountain a small white house. My cousin had gotten some binoculars, and so we looked at the house. It was run down, in very bad condition. Obviously, the house gave off some bad vibes, but we just ignored it. We came back home, and a year later we went back to that place. When we tried looking for the house again, it was nowhere to be found. We looked at the same spot, only to see fully grown trees. Me and my family haven't gone camping in a long time, maybe 3 years or so, but we plan on going back to Silverwood Lake when we do go camping. I'm kinda nervous just thinking about going back to that place, but I hope that this is just a one-time occurrence. I parked my car in the dirt lot and stepped outside. I went to the back, opened the trunk, and grabbed my bag filled with all the items I would need for this weekend of solo camping. So with my backpack on, I stepped onto the trail. After a few minutes of walking, I stopped to take a drink of water, and as I grabbed my bottle, I heard a branch snapping. I whipped my head around with my bottle in my hand and faced the sound, not knowing what I might see. When I turned, I saw a small rodent leap into a bush. Thanks for the scare, I thought. I continued on the trail, watching the trees stand tall like nothing could knock them down. I felt the calm spring breeze on my face and watched an assortment of animals scavenge for food, until I saw the hill the campsite was on, so I picked up the pace until I reached the campsite. I stepped into the campsite and put my bag down. The first 2 hours of being in the campsite were setting things up, like a tent, fire, and even a hammock my mom bought me. When it was about noon, I lit the fire I previously built to cook food, and as I ate, I relished the sounds of the forest. I saw the sun starting to set, so I put everything in my tent. I hopped in the tent, zipped it up, and turned a light on inside so I could read for a bit before calling it a night. After reading, I decided to get some rest, so I turned the light off and tried to fall asleep. I was about to fall asleep when I heard someone whisper, "You're gonna sleep with the tent unzipped." I froze, didn't respond, but sure enough, my tent was unzipped. So with one swift motion, I zipped it back up and sat up. I was waiting for another whisper, but it never came. Were they helping me? Did they unzip my tent? I had a million thoughts in my head, but I just wanted to forget it, so I put my head down again and closed my eyes. It wasn't even 5 minutes when I heard footsteps circling my tent over and over, when they suddenly stopped and began pressing on the tent. My whole body felt so heavy it was almost hard to breathe, but I took a breath and then screamed, "Get the hell away from me!" Immediately, they stopped pressing on my tent, but then began laughing maniacally and slowly started unzipping my tent while they're still laughing. My fight or flight instincts kicked in and only one option presented itself. If I wanted to survive, I had to fight my way out. I got in the most fight-ready position I could get in, but it was hard in a 3-foot-tall tent. As the tent flap fell, I remember a long-limbed, shriveled man laughing at me with a grin that stretched to his ears. I threw a punch with my right hand, and when I saw he fell from the strike, I jumped out of my tent and ran to my car, leaving my stuff. But as I ran, I realized that another thing was chasing me. 2 things were now hot on my tail, and my adrenaline spiked as I heard one of them scream, "Matthew!" It was the voice that had whispered earlier, but instead of a calm, eerie voice, it was a raspy screech. At that point, I made it to my car, hopped in, and peeled out of there. The next day, I cautiously walked to the campsite. When I got there, all my stuff was there, just the way it was left. The only thing different was a blurb of writing in the dirt that read, "Come back, please. We need your help." I saw something crawling slowly in the corner of my eye. I turned to face it, but there was nothing there. Since then, every time I'm solo camping, even in different woods, it feels like a million eyes are watching me from every angle, and I can never shake their gaze. I don't usually go camping by myself, but my friends were all working, and I had the day off, so I decided to go on a new camping spot. It wasn't a big spot, it was in the middle of nowhere and it had a spot for a campfire. which was weird because it wasn't a place where you could rent a place out or anything like that. It was just a random open spot, but I didn't think anything about it. I got out of my truck, and as I was setting up the tent, I found scratch marks on a tree and animal bones, but I thought it was just another teenager's prank. I finished and lit the fire to cook hot dogs. I had about 2 or 3 hot dogs before I decided to settle in for the night. I was half asleep when I woke up to a shadow figure walking around the tent. I grabbed my knife and pepper spray and prayed for the best. A few minutes later, I heard a wild sound like the scream of a human or a mountain lion. But the figure was definitely human, as I heard it scream too. It was deep, scratchy, not really human-like, but I could make out a human shape from the figure. As I tried to sleep, I heard as if a dog was eating, but not kibble, just a slap of a chop like a human. It finally stopped and I was able to fall asleep. When I woke up and went outside to pack up, I saw a half-eaten deer, but it wasn't a bear. The head of the deer was cut off and propped on a log. The intestines of the deer was eaten and the leg was cut off. I wanted to stay until Monday, saying it was Saturday, but this was just too unsettling. I packed up, and before I left, I looked at the animal bones again to realize some of them were human. I jumped in my truck, and when I drove off, I saw a shadowy figure in the rearview mirror.